Tonight, the candidates go out on the trail after a historic debate. President Biden's campaign in crisis mode as he tries to tamp down Democratic Party panic about his performance.
Folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to.
Plus, former President Trump touts his night on the stage despite a number of falsehoods and inflammatory statements.
The millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border, they're taking black jobs now.
Our new reporting and what we're hearing from voters. The CBS Evening News starts now. Good evening. I'm Margaret Brennan, in for Nora O'Donnell. It is a tight presidential race, and President Biden argues his opponent, Donald Trump, is a threat to the very future of American democracy. Mr. Biden had hoped last night's debate would tip the race in his favor. Instead, today, he's facing calls to step aside. Today, a lively President Biden sought to calm concerns by campaigning in the key state of North Carolina, arguing that he is still up to the job of commander-in-chief. Despite those day-long attempts to reassure, just moments ago, the New York Times editorial board published this scathing headline, quote, "To serve his country, President Biden should leave the race." With just 4 months left until Election Day, Donald Trump today rallied his supporters in Virginia. Last night, Trump repeatedly made false claims and would not commit to accepting the results of the November election. We have team coverage of last night's historic debate, and CBS's Nancy Cordes will start us off.
I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious.
Campaigning in North Carolina this afternoon, President Biden sought to reassure voters, even as he acknowledged what they all saw last night.
Folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong.
He sounded less hoarse and more energetic than he did on the debate stage.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare,
where his halting answers fed into pre-existing concerns about his age and acuity.
The total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence.
Behind the scenes today, Biden aides did damage control, reaching out to rattle Democratic lawmakers.
It was a bad night, but it's not the end of the campaign.
Did Joe Biden have a bad night, in my opinion? Yes, he absolutely did.
In a radio interview, New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen acknowledged the party is grappling with what to do now.
He had a really bad night last night. So the question is that going to disqualify him for the next 4 years? I think that's going to be determined.
Publicly, Democratic leaders tried to tamp down the concerns.
Stay the course.
We saw integrity on one side and dishonesty on the other. That's how I saw it.
And yet it was Biden's struggle to counter Trump's dishonesty last night that has Democrats down ballot worried.
He wants open borders. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times.
Fact of the matter is that he's dead wrong.
Trump held a victory rally today in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Despite the fact that crooked Joe Biden spent the entire week at Camp David resting, working, studying. He studied very hard. He studied so hard that he didn't know what the hell he was doing.
The Republican House Speaker, Mike Johnson, argued Biden should be removed from office.
Under the Constitution, of course, it's the cabinet that makes that decision. I would ask the cabinet members to search their hearts.
We asked voters around the country what they thought.
He's not the perfect candidate, but Trump is a convicted criminal.
I'm not going to give up on him. I'm going to give him a chance. Democrats should have woke up today with a plan B. That's what I believe. I really don't think he should be our candidate.
The Biden team concedes the president faltered last night, but they insist that Trump did himself no favors either. They say there are no conversations here at the White House or at the campaign about Biden bowing out, and they say he has every intention, Margaret, of appearing at the second and final presidential debate on September 10th.
Nancy, a lot can happen between now and then, and I know you'll be covering it. For more analysis now, let's bring in CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa and Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Major, if democracy itself is on the line, why are Democrats playing this down so much?
Because they know the decision about staying on the ballot is entirely in the hands of President Biden. Democratic National Committee rules are very clear on this, Margaret. Unless Biden steps down, there's no mechanism to deny him the nomination. There is no eject button. To quote the voter we just heard from, there is no plan B. But, Margaret, that does not mean that Biden's re-election campaign isn't in more trouble than it was before the debate. It had to exert a ton of energy today to reassure Democrats, extract statements of supporting his renomination from Congressman Clyburn, former President Obama. There are also deep concerns I'm hearing about institutional party donors potentially holding back, not giving the re-election campaign as much as they originally wanted to. Not because they don't believe in the cause, but they now have fresh doubts about the ability of President Biden to carry that cause to victory.
Robert, how is the campaign going to convince the public to forget what they saw?
They're following the candidate, President Biden. And Margaret, I've been talking to people close to the president today, and they say this is someone who has been on the public stage for more than a half century. Elected to the Senate in 1972 in the wake of a personal tragedy. He has been through that and political humiliations over the years. He keeps going and plowing forward. He's stubborn personally, stubborn politically. His friends say he's not going to give up the presidency, something he's had his eye on for so long. He's carrying on, and he dismisses calls, whether it's the New York Times editorial board tonight or other Democrats, for him to step away from the ticket. He's staying in. The only person who could maybe convince him otherwise, the First Lady Jill Biden, but she's with him, I'm told, tonight.
Gentlemen, thank you for your analysis. And now we're going to go to the Supreme Court and a consequential ruling today that could impact the prosecutions of more than 300 cases related to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, as well as the special counsel case against former President Donald Trump. CBS's Jan Crawford is at the Supreme Court.
The ruling means prosecutors may have overreached when they charged several hundred January 6 defendants, including former President Donald Trump, with obstruction of an official proceeding. The felony charge, part of a law passed by Congress to address accounting fraud, carries a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. In a 6-3 decision written by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court said the law requires prosecutors to show something more, that they impaired the availability or integrity of records and documents. Biden appointee Ketanji Brown Jackson joined the conservative majority, with Trump appointee Amy Coney Barrett in dissent with the court's other two liberals. Of the more than 1,400 people being prosecuted for the Capitol riot, more than 350 faced an obstruction charge. 27 are still serving their sentences for it. For Trump, it is the basis for 2 of the 4 charges against him. But the decision does not rule out obstruction prosecutions for those defendants who interfered with evidence. For example, certificates for state electors that Congress was counting.
Look, today's decision is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for Donald Trump. The charges against Trump, I think, will have to be reevaluated, but that's not to say that the prosecution under this law can't continue.
Also today, the court decided 2 other major cases, both in a 6-3 vote. In another opinion by Roberts, the court overturned a 40-year-old decision, long criticized by conservatives, that gave federal administrative agencies sweeping power to regulate wide swaths of American life. And in a decision by Justice Neil Gorsuch, the court ruled that a town in Oregon could enforce its ban on people sleeping in parks and public spaces, even if they are homeless.
Now, the court will return to the bench on Monday to release the last decisions of the term, including that major case on whether Trump can even be prosecuted for his actions around January 6. What, if any, immunity does he have? Margaret?
Significant decision. Jan Crawford, we'll be following your reporting closely. Well, we are learning new details tonight from the 10-count indictment against former Uvalde school police chief Pete Arredondo. These are the first criminal charges over the failed law enforcement response to the killing of 21 people during the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School 2 years ago. CBS's Janet Shamlian spoke with the family members of 2 of the children who were killed.
Former Uvalde school police chief Pete Arredondo facing justice. A grand jury charging him with failing to act as a gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School.
Wait, Chief is in there. Chief's in charge right now. Hold on.
The felony indictment accuses Arredondo of delaying the response by law enforcement officers as the gunman was hunting and shooting children. The indictment says he failed to identify this as an active shooter incident, to enforce the district's own active shooter response plan, and to provide keys that would have allowed officers to quickly enter the classroom. 77 minutes went by as the carnage continued. Arredondo was taken into custody at Uvalde County Jail and released last night after posting $10,000 bail. A second officer, Adrian Gonzalez, was also indicted and turned himself in today.
After more than 2 years, what is this moment like for you?
I've got mixed emotions because I'm happy that Arredondo and Gonzalez are facing these charges, but also that's just a step. There needs to be more.
Brett Cross's 10-year-old, Uzziah Garcia, was killed in the attack. So is Jesse Rizzo's niece, Jackie Cazares.
It's an emotional day. It's something that we've been waiting for a long time.
Do you think there will be more indictments?
I hope so. I made Uzi a promise that I would never let anything bad happen to him, and I got made a liar. So I have to fight so that no other kids meet the same fate that he did, so that no other parents have to go through what we did.
The second officer charged is in jail here in Uvalde. He is expected to post bond, and there's no word yet whether the other officers involved in the response will be charged. Margaret?
Janet, thank you. This Independence Day could be the hottest on record in some cities while dangerous storms make their way across the U.S. For details, let's bring in CBS Bay Area meteorologist Paul Hagen. Good evening, Paul.
Margaret, good evening. The big weather story for this last weekend in June is going to be extreme heat in the south central U.S. Excessive heat warnings and heat advisories in effect. The heat risk, which is essentially the threat of heat illness, is going to be in the high category, spreading across even more of the country as we head through the weekend. And then for the 4th of July holiday, we're going to see the southwestern and western U.S. getting in on the action. These are the forecast highs for Independence Day, 113 degrees in Las Vegas. It's supposed to be hot this time of year, but not that hot. In the south central and southeastern U.S., temperatures into the 90s and low 100s will feel more like over 110 degrees with the humidity factored in. In the short term, we are tracking the development of a severe weather threat moving from the upper Midwest and pushing into the northeastern U.S. over the next 48 hours. A slight risk of severe weather, which means an elevated threat for the Great Plains today, is going to move into the upper Ohio River Valley and the Great Lakes on Saturday, then towards the I-95 corridor with damaging straight line winds, hail, even isolated tornadoes possible. And Margaret, if all of that wasn't enough, a new tropical system has developed and will strengthen as it moves into the Caribbean next week.
Paul Hagen, thank you. Now a look at tonight's other top stories, starting with the kickoff to a busy holiday travel week that could be record-breaking. CBS's Errol Barnett explains.
The TSA expects 3 million people to pass through airline security checkpoints like this one at Newark any day now. Margaret, when that happens, it would mark the busiest airline travel day ever. More than 50,000 flights are in the skies today, and over the holiday week, the TSA expects to screen more than 32 million people, a 5% increase over last 4th of July.
There were no empty seats on the aircraft.
No empty seats. Airplanes were full.
Yeah.
Now to Oklahoma, where teachers are now being mandated to incorporate the Bible into some lessons. It comes a week after Louisiana required the 10 Commandments to be displayed in every public school classroom. CBS's Omar Villafranca has more.
Margaret, Oklahoma State School Superintendent Ryan Walters directed public schools to use the Bible as a teaching tool for students in 5th through 12th grade when they're being taught history or civilization and its influence on the U.S. Constitution. Walters said the state may supply teaching materials at taxpayer expense, adding strict compliance is expected. The state attorney general's office told me it doesn't see the memo as a mandate and pointed to state law saying that lessons and textbook choices are made locally by districts. Critics say Walters can't use state money to buy Bibles and expect his move to be challenged in court.
And overseas now to Gaza and that problematic pier the U.S. military built off the coast to bring aid to civilians. CBS's Imtiaz Tayyib reports there's more trouble ahead.
Well, not only is the $230 million U.S. military-built pier being dismantled yet again because of bad weather, Margaret, it may not be reinstalled. We traveled on a U.S. military vessel to the temporary platform just this week. Even in calm seas, it clanged and shook. And since becoming operational in mid-May, it's been plagued with problems, only functioning as it's meant to for around 18 days. Now, while on board, we saw some aid trucks roll into Gaza. In total, around 8,000 metric tons of aid, or just over 500 truckloads, have made it in, with a Pentagon spokesperson saying there's no date for when operations will resume.
Thanks to our CBS News teams around the globe. The latest shark bite happened down in Florida. Again, we'll have those latest details. A man was rushed to the hospital today after being bitten by a shark off Fernandina Beach, just north of Jacksonville, Florida. Officials say the man was bitten on the arm after catching the shark while fishing, and he tossed it back in the water. He was listed in critical condition, but is expected to recover. There's an update on those 2 American astronauts waiting for a ride home from the space station. That's coming up.
If you can't watch the CBS Evening News, you can listen. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
NASA said today that 2 American astronauts are not stranded at the International Space Station, but they will have to stay there perhaps several weeks longer than planned. Engineers are troubleshooting Boeing's Starliner capsule. The veteran test pilots were scheduled to return to Earth more than 2 weeks ago, but problems with the capsule's propulsion system have delayed the flight home several times. Heart of America is next with a salute to a member of the CBS News family.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Farxiga. Visit us at farxiga.com.
Finally, tonight's Heart of America. A salute to our very own David Martin, who has served CBS News viewers for the past 40 years by covering the most significant stories about America's military and national security. Here's Norah O'Donnell.
This farewell gathering is a testament to David.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin turning the tables on David Martin today in a place where the veteran reporter feels at home, the Pentagon briefing room.
David, thanks for one of the great runs in the history of military reporting. And thanks for all that you've done to make our military better.
It was a moment to honor David, a legend on the Pentagon beat who has reported on virtually every major defense, intelligence, and international affairs story for CBS News since 1983.
As you can see behind me, the Pentagon is still smoldering from that direct hit.
He was at the Pentagon on September 11, 2001, and since then has covered every development on the war on terror.
All you have to do is look around.
David has been first with new reporting for 4 decades, breaking the news about the first night of the Iraq War.
It's fair to say the invasion of Iraq has begun.
David also brings humanity to the stories of wounded service members.
People back here think the war's winding down.
Over there on the ground, it's not winding down.
His vast experience and deep network of sources have earned David multiple Emmy Awards and recognition of journalistic excellence.
My career has been one long lesson in the limits of military power.
For all his service and dedication to our viewers and CBS News, David Martin is tonight's Heart of America.
And as Secretary Austin put it today, David Martin is one of the greatest beat reporters in the history of U.S. journalism, and I'd have to agree with that. He's accurate, substantive, and focused on the facts, not the flash. He's made us all better journalists here at CBS. That's tonight's CBS Evening News. Be sure to tune in to Face the Nation this Sunday. Our guests include Maryland Governor Wes Moore and potential Trump running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. For Norah O'Donnell, I'm Margaret Brennan. We'll see you Sunday.